Good day. My name is Paul Romer. I'm a professor. You know what the problem is with professors. We like to talk. Woodrow Wilson, one of our presidents, was a professor. Someone asked him how long it takes him to prepare for a 10-minute speech. And he said, well, it's 10 minutes. It takes me all of 2 weeks to prepare the speech. But if it's 20 minutes, I can prepare it in a week. And if you're ready for 4 hours, I'm ready now. So I have 4 hours worth of things to tell you about cities, and we'll have to compress it down into one assignment, which, to use the code phrase of today, you should make a priority. Your priority tonight should be to go to the website for the Museum of the City of New York and look for an online exhibition called The Greatest Grid, and read about the grid and the plan that was behind the grid that you see when you go out in the streets. And after you read about that tonight, look at this city tomorrow through different eyes. Because this grid, which is illustrated here, you can get more complete maps and you can zoom way in. These are very detailed maps. This grid gives us an insight about a solution to a slow motion but very serious crisis that the world is facing that most people don't think about. You're aware that something like half the world's population is now in cities, so half of 7 billion, 3.5 billion people in cities. We're going to end up this city in having at least 70% of what will approach 10 billion people. So we're going to go from 3.5 billion to 7 billion people in cities. So we're going to double the number of people in cities. That means we're going to need to make a lot of room in cities for people. But it's worse than that, because spending on urban floor space, what people spend on their apartment, their house, grows in proportion to their income. Worldwide income, GDP, is growing at about 4% per year. That means that it will double about every 17 years. So spending on urban floor space will double because will go way up because there will be twice as many people. But the people who are already there will all want to have slightly bigger or substantially bigger places to live. So the demand for urban floor space is going to grow phenomenally over the course of the next century. And if we don't respond with an increase in supply, that will map exactly into increases in prices. So you've got a choice. It's a mixture of more supply at a constant price, proportional increases in prices if no change in supply, or some mixture of those two. And if cities are, as they are, the opportunity for someone who wants to get a job, get a first job, get a formal sector job, get a job where you're going to learn on the job, get a job where you're going to be able to work in the modern economy. If cities are those gateways, if we can't keep it affordable for people to live in a city, to move to a city, to get a first job in a city, we're going to create a horrific problem in terms of widening inequality. The people who were our predecessors, who had a chance to move into cities and get started, who made opportunities for us, will have had something that the people who are not yet taking advantage of that opportunity will ever have. So making room, what a colleague of mine calls the making room agenda, making room in urban areas for more people to come and for the people who are already there to have slightly bigger places to live, is a critical part, perhaps the most critical determinant of global ineconomy over the course of the next century. So how can we increase the supply of urban floor space? There's really just two ways to go. We can expand it in existing cities, or we can build entirely new cities. Either way, we have to think about what does it take to plan for a lot more urban area, a lot more built area? And what the plan from New York, if they could bring it back up, shows is that the one essential part of planning is a two-dimensional grid of surface area that will be the means for anybody living in a city to connect up with anybody else. Every vehicle, every package, every person, every message on a wire, every liter of water or sewage, all of that will make use of a two-dimensional grid of space on the surface that will facilitate all of the connections. What they did in 1811 was at a time when the development in the city was just barely in the bottom tip. You can see the streets are at two different angles. That was where development had gotten to in 1811. What they did then was just draw lines on the map and say, okay, for the rest of the island, we're going to have some avenues that go basically north and south, other streets that go east and west. And they went out and put stakes in the ground long before, like sometimes like 5 decades, 6 decades before any development took place there, but said, when you build here, don't get in the way of the public space, the street, where the cars will be, or the buses, or the sidewalks, because you'll impede the mobility. And that provision for connection in the future is what made New York City such a phenomenal success. It made it a place where people could go and get opportunity. Start out in a sweatshop. It was only a little more than 100 years ago that people were getting jobs in sweatshops in this city. But start out in a sweatshop, work your way up, and be part of the modern world. Now, economists get this wrong because they say something like, well, we don't need to have any planning, we're just going to let the market rip. And if you've looked at cities and urban area where there is no planning, you know how badly that turns out. If you don't plan for this public space that connects people, it will not develop into a successful city. On the other hand, the architects get it wrong because they think you have to plan too much. The architects of today would have said to the planners in 1811, well, where are the schools going to go? And then in 1811, they would have said, you'll figure that out later. Where are the hospitals going to be? Where's the daycare center? What are the uniforms going to be for the taxi drivers? Yeah, we'll figure that out later. The thing I want you to think about when you go out the door of this hotel and look at Fifth Avenue is that Fifth Avenue, where we are, is close to the top of this map. It may be even off the map. They didn't actually plan for Central Park originally. It was one problem with the plan. Central Park was added later. There's a square there that you can see that was planned as public space. They didn't protect that. That got built out. But so we're way up, a long way away from where the city was at this point. And there wasn't even such a thing as Fifth Avenue. But the planners in 1811 said, we're going to make Fifth Avenue be roughly 30 meters wide. We're going to set aside a bunch of space so that they can connect with each other. And they did this at a time when they didn't even know what a bicycle was. So I don't know what they thought we were going to do with Fifth Avenue. I mean, maybe they had in mind the sidewalks. Okay, that was good. But they knew they didn't have to know what people were going to do, and they'd have to write a plan and anticipate it. If you gave the public sector control over enough surface area to let people connect, then people will make decisions later to make this a vibrant, successful city. And it takes a lot of space. If you take this map and analyze it, in Midtown, about a third of the surface area of the land was set aside for these connections. Usually the real estate developers think, I don't want to give away all that land, I want to make it into building sites. But it's all of that connecting space, that public space, which made it possible for Midtown to then support the kind of densities and the whole island to support the kind of densities that we live with now. So, if we're going to deal with the problem of making room for everybody in the world, we're going to have to let cities get bigger, They will naturally get much denser in the center if there's enough public space to connect people up. If there isn't, it's too late, it's hard to fix. But we're still going to have to let cities get bigger. And we should be thinking about whether or not we can get there fast enough by expanding existing cities, and think about the possibility of starting new ones, because it's going to be a huge challenge to keep up with the increasing demand. And much as we all would love to have capital gains on our own apartments and houses, it's going to be an ugly world for our children and our grandchildren in terms of inequality and opportunity if we can't make room for everybody to move into the city, because cities are where the action is. Thank you.